Welcome to Life Unrestricted.
This is your show if you're sick of living a life controlled by food and exercise rules, and if you're ready to learn how to accept yourself and enjoy the heck out of life. My gig is about body image, femininity, self-worth, and resilience. Come on, let's walk side by side as we slowly step out of restriction misery and unlock our true selves.
Your host, Merritt Boxler, is a former national radio DJ, freelance journalist, speaker, and writer with a passion to make women feel good in their bodies. This is a show brought to you live from Switzerland.
Well, hello, lovely radicals. Merritt here with episode number 13. By now you know what my goal is. It's pretty simple. I want to question some of our culture's toxic ideas about what defines a human being's worth in this world. Let us question why society places so much value on something as shallow and impermanent as appearance, when really all that counts is how we connect to others, how we can make an impact in the world, how we love, how true we are to our hearts. Because somehow when I thought of all this, you know what came to my mind? It was the book Top 5 Regrets of the Dying of that hospice nurse called Bronnie Ware. She had spent years caring for people on their deathbeds, and she wrote a book about the regrets they had. And when I thought of all that in the context of dieting, weight obsessing, body shame, it just occurred to me that, well, we could put them into a logic context with the top 5 regrets. So I'll just run through them and tell you what I mean by that. The number 1 regret the dying had was they wished they had the courage to live life true to themselves rather than to what others expected of them. Well, in terms of body shame, weight obsessing, that translates into living in the body that we naturally have rather than forcefully manipulating it into a size we think others expect it to be. Number 2 regret of the dying, they wish they hadn't worked so hard. Man, this working so hard to get the body we think will bring us happiness, we think will bring us love, we think will bring us acceptance and freedom, right? When all of this work does is take happiness, it takes love, it takes acceptance and freedom from us. And it also takes the majority of our time and our mental bandwidth from us. Well, on we go. Number 3 regret of the dying, they wish they had more courage to express their feelings. No explanation needed here, right? Same goes for us disordered eaters and weight obsessors. How about feeling and expressing our feelings without all these inhibitions we place on ourselves and without being busy and obsessive about our food and weight, and instead live and feel? And then regret number 4, they wish they had stayed in touch with their friends. This one's pretty hurtful for me because all of my obsession with my weight and my body and diets and food rules and exercise, with time that kept me from truly connecting to others. In the case of eating disorders and exercise addiction, it eventually leads to increased isolation. We know that by now, and it leads to shame and disconnect. And to lose a word on the ever-present diet talk that has become so normalized in our culture, I don't think that's real bonding either. So this body obsessing is killing the soul either way. And we do not really stay in touch with all of our friends either. And then we have number 5, regret of the dying. And I'm sure this one's going to knock you right in the feels too. They wish they had let themselves be happier. Bam. Let themselves be happier. Did you ever think of it that way? That you could actually allow yourself to be happy right now in the body you have instead of X number of pounds from now? Hits home hard, doesn't it? Because it seems so obvious when we point it out like that, right? all the 5 regrets of the dying somehow mingle into our obsession with our weight. And I hope this kind of wakes you up as well as to, am I really spending my life like this? Do I want this? Am I not going to be on my deathbed looking back and saying, oh my God, how did I ever waste so much time being weight obsessed and being dieting and being ashamed of my body when I could have just lived? I mean, personally, I really don't want my tombstone to say she was a strict eater and showed impressive discipline with her workouts. Neither do I want it to say she decided to invest most of her energy into trying to shrink her body and she never really found her true purpose and passion in life. Nor do I want it to say she decided against living fully and deprived herself of pleasure just to fit into society's body ideal instead. Hell no! Who in their right mind wants that? We are souls that have been given a life and a body as a vehicle to share our love, our passion, our kindness, and our creativity with the world. No one will care which pant size you wore or what your belly was shaped like. They will remember you and me for the hugs we gave, for our adventurous nature, for our poems, for our empathy, our kindness, maybe for our honesty, or how reliable we were, how good of a friend we were. If we didn't obsess about weight loss and training like maniacs to have some muscle or other show up on our bodies, who knows? Maybe we could really make an impact, change the world, invent new things, discover renewable energy sources. What the hell? I don't know. Write books, care wholeheartedly for other people, open up animal shelters, building communities, expressing the truest version of ourselves. Anything really that has meaning as opposed to dieting and being obsessed about shrinking our bodies. So what that means is we have to embrace our messy lives, just as my guest has. So in this episode of the Life Unrestricted podcast, meet Chris Cole. He is from Boulder, Colorado. He's a self-employed strategic intervention coach, and he works with clients in recovery from any number of addiction, mood, or behavioral issues. He has been through quite a journey himself, and he knows what it means to lose ourselves in the pursuit of perfection and control. Chris got diagnosed with bipolar disorder as a teenager, struggled with substance abuse, disordered eating, and troubles with body image, and he has experienced psychosis. In fact, he has experienced such a roller coaster ride in his youth that he wrote a book about it. It's called The Body of Chris, a memoir of obsession, addiction, and madness. It's a book I highly recommend to you. It's great. To me, it's not surprising that Chris has turned into a highly compassionate, positive force that helps people find their truth and their unique healing by offering an experienced perspective, a radical wellness orientation, and an encouraging relationship that is crucial, as we know, to sustainable growth. As he lives in Boulder, the first thing I told him was what someone else had told me only recently, and that was that Boulder was one of the most beautiful places in the world, and I had never been there.
Oh, man, I don't know if I would agree with that, but it's certainly wonderful. I love it.
So, as I said, I'm very happy that you came on my show, and I've been secretly sort of plotting to invite you ever since I heard you on another podcast, which was a while ago. And I was so fascinated with you and your story, and it really struck me how open and vulnerable, and at times also very hilarious, you talked about your struggles and your journey. And I would love for you to share your incredible life story with us and start back as early as you want to.
Sure. You know, part of the reason I do what I do, and part of the reason that I, am vocal about my story is because I have basically 3 issues, and I sort of somewhat affectionately refer to them as the three-headed monster. So I have addiction, primarily alcoholism, and I have dealt with disordered eating in various forms. And then I have this bipolar disorder. And like, so in psychiatry or psychotherapy or whatever, they might be classified as three different things. But for me, it's just one thing that I live with. It's so fluid and dynamic. So how I feel, my sense of worth and my beliefs about my body, and that all affects my mood. And then how, my mood affects how I eat and how I feel like I need to eat, and what intuitively I can understand my body needs. And it's all so intricately woven. And in that sense, there's a lot of things that I've realized throughout my childhood that contributed to just sort of a general unsettled relationship with life, with people, with my body and my food. And that was also all so confusing. The marker of the beginning of my journey, I would say, when I first it was blatantly obvious that I had a sickness, was when I had a manic episode of psychosis when I first went to college at 18 years old. And I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and it was this huge, huge ordeal. So basically, there were a lot of factors involved, and I go very in depth in my book about it. But basically, there was a girl I was in love with who didn't really love me back. Somebody died in our little community, my little fraternity community that I was getting involved with. And it brought up all these really painful feelings about my best friend dying when I was 16. And I started uncontrollably crying. It was all this kind of stuff was going on. And then the next morning, I just all of a sudden felt this transcendent bliss, like everything was perfect. I felt like I was somehow being graced by God. I mean, it was this very spiritual, religious experience for me. And it just so happened that was the beginning of manic psychosis, and I had no idea about any of this. And so what started as this real feeling of unity and transcendence quickly started turning into me thinking that I was the second coming of Christ, and that I was going to save the world, and I needed to find disciples and all this kind of stuff. And so then I go to my dorm room, and my friends are all like, "What's going on with you? What did you take?" Because I was really involved with drugs and alcohol. So people thought I was high or something, or tripping. And I wasn't. And then so then I basically thought one of them was the devil, ran downstairs. The dorm police came in and arrested me, and I got taken to jail. And
oh God.
And it was very intense. And so I'm delusional this whole time. It felt as if I was in a dream. That's the sort of same feeling, if I could describe it to a listener. And so then when I get to the jail, I think that the police are the Pharisees, and they're going to crucify me and all this kind of stuff. Well, something that I start to do is strip off all my clothes. And so part of the reason I'm telling this is because it was such an upheaval. I was so ashamed of my body and my nakedness. And so then I also start telling the police officers they need to come look at my crotch to see how small my penis was. This is what I'm telling I'm telling the police officers. And I'm demanding they come look. And so there's this whole scene in the jail of the police officers like joking, like, should you go look? Should you go look? Maybe it'll shut them up. And, even in that altered state, I would never forget this event. It's like this. So this young police officer is the poor victim that has to come appease my whims. Comes over, he looks down, and he looks back, and he laughs, and he says, "Yeah, it's pretty small."
Oh.
And they all start laughing.
Oh no!
And so then, they come in, they sedate me, and I wake up, and I'm totally out of sorts. Well, that was the first indication to me that something was just terribly wrong, And then what happened was, I get hospitalized. It's this whole like drawn out thing. Well, I get diagnosed as bipolar type 1 eventually, dual diagnosis with addiction and alcoholism. Well, because of the nature of manic psychosis, so often it involves getting naked, believing you're the Messiah, real speedy, hyper spiritual thinking, stuff like that. So that's somewhat typical. And so what happened was, throughout that process, the idea that I had these painful sort of repressed beliefs and emotions about my body were just sort of swept under the rug as a part of psychosis. And so it wasn't until years later that I was able to look back and say, wow, so when my mind was going totally haywire, the place that I went was my body, my nakedness, my worth. All this stuff was coming up. And so it took years for me to unpack that. And so I grew up, I was always sort of a overweight child as far as like how a doctor would classify it. I love discussing the sort of the difficulty involved with the BMI chart and it's like they take a small child and they say, okay, on this big, huge chart, and the chart, to a little kid, the chart seems just like total nonsense. What is this? But all they say, or this is all I remember at least, is you see this line, this is where you should be, and then you see this dot way over here.
That's you.
This is you. This is where you are.
Yeah, exactly.
From
that moment on, I'm flawed. That's
right,
the moment where they tell you you're not the norm, you're not normal, we need to fix you. In the up. Yeah.
Yeah, I've written about the tragedy of the BMI charts. Like I have two boys, and 4 and 2. And so I noticed immediately when I took my oldest to the pediatrician that they had these BMI charts on the wall, and I would think, after all this time since I was his age, that they would have evolved to be more sensitive and these kinds of things. But it was the opposite. So it used to be kind of a grayscale chart when I was a kid, and it was kind of confusing. Well, now it's color-coded, and it's like, so the normal area is green, like a green light, right? Mm-hmm. And then if you're in a risk area, it's yellow, like yield. And then obese is red.
Bam.
Stop. And then and something that I found so interesting about it is the underweight was light blue.
As if it weren't a problem.
Or something different. As if it were not something to be cautious about. And so that was really fascinating to me too. It's like, shouldn't it be red down there just like up top?
Yeah, if we have colors, exactly.
Right, if we have to have colors, yeah. Can we at least have underweight and overweight both be red? And then not only that, but there's also these computer-generated images of a little boy and a little girl. And the little boy, it shows him as a normal weight and it shows his little stats next to him, height, weight, BMI. And then the same image of the boy is computer-generated to be obese. It's the same boy, but with those stats. And so a child can look every time they're in the doctor and see this same boy, skinny and fat. That's basically what they're doing.
Good and bad.
it's just unbelievable to me that that's how we're going to think about it and teach it to our children, you know, very far removed from the solution. And so, like, it's hard for me to know how much was my doctor and how much was my family, because it was so intertwined. So, like, if my family needed me to learn something about, you know, eating better, eating healthier or something, it was sort of like the doctor's domain. And the doctor, well, Chris, the doctor said this, or the doctor said that. But it's like, you know, I know if a doctor told me that about my kid, that would not be the person that I was looking to for wisdom. Mm-hmm. There's sort of a shared responsibility when it comes to our children. But I would say a turning point for me as a child was there was a camp, or not a camp, there was a class at the hospital they were offering kids. I think it was either called Shape Up or Shape Down. I think it was called Shape Up.
What? Because Shape Down, that's terrible.
Right. I think it was one of those. And I mean, I did some research to try to find out a couple years back, and now I can't remember again. But either way, whatever. Yes, you had to get in shape, you know. And so I went to these classes, and they would be teaching. So, like, there were a number of weird things about this class that I just sort of personally remember. I don't think as an adult, people untrained to disordered eating would probably not notice anything, you know, which I think is part of the problem, is we're not very culturally aware of how these things can affect us. But basically, it was like there was an aerobics class where we had to, like, do these step up, step down type things.
Aerobics.
Right, exactly. And then there was sort of a nutrition class where we were taught the food pyramid. You know, of course, all I saw was all my favorite foods were bad and at the top and to be eaten in the smallest amounts. You know?
It was the same thing I thought. I want to have those at the top.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then there was some sort of like psychological appraisal that I just wasn't very aware of. But, you know, my mom told me when I got older how, and I kind of remember this, one of the exercises I had to do was they had a piece of paper and they had like different body shapes, and they would have you identify which body shape yours looked like, which one you were. And my mom remembers me picking the one in the middle, like the normal average athletic build or whatever. And they sort of saw that as me not being aware of my body, as if that was potentially problematic. I find that really interesting, you know, for a child to be like in kindergarten or first grade or something and not be affected, or at least not want to be affected. Because there is sort of an idea too, like maybe I chose the one that I thought was the right answer.
Yeah, maybe.
So anyways, that kind of stuff happened throughout my childhood, you know, and I got bullied. I mean, there was kids get bullied, right? If it's not for being overweight, it's going to be something else, you know. That's sort of how I look at it. I was sensitive, and I feel like something that people that don't understand bullying, they think maybe there's some sort of external fix to not getting bullied. But I actually think that it's the sensitive kids, and that there's some sort of energetic awareness that children have, you know, that if a child is sensitive or perceived to be weak, they will get bullied.
Yeah, for whatever reason.
Doesn't have a whole lot to do with the reasons why.
Yeah, but if you're in a bigger body as a kid, as I was as well, then it's merciless. Exactly. It really is.
The most challenging memories that come up is like, so I had a friend just be relentlessly teasing me about my body, and we eventually got in a fight, you know? I mean, I remember him saying to me, or announcing to a big group of us while we were walking in the gym, that Chris doesn't look that fat from the front, but from the back, he doubles in size. This was his comment. It was one of those comments that was so profoundly piercing, so profoundly painful, because I actually, at that age, at that time, I was probably early middle school. I was already aware of trying to hide my body, and I would slouch forward to try to physically make my body as small as possible. And when he said that, it not only did it let me know that my little tricks were not working, but it also, more importantly, it sort of told me that people cared about my body as much as I was afraid that they did. You know, it was
exactly.
It was horribly validating in that way, you know?
Yeah, it's terrifying. I can imagine the shame, the burning shame in that moment. And you're never the same, basically. You don't know how to move. And yeah.
You know, he ended up picking a fight with me. And this was challenging too, is he was my friend. Or I thought he was my friend. We had a fist fight in front of the principal's office. And that was a really, you know, difficult time for me too. I didn't really understand, why are we even fighting? And what's interesting too is so this kid was also like kind of tall and slender, you know. So our body types at that time looked sort of starkly contrasted. And so I also wonder for him, was I sort of this polar opposite that for whatever reason challenged his idea of what he's worth, what he needed. And so it was really interesting, you know. And I think as guys, like, women are so much more aware of these body image issues than men. But I mean, men are doing this too, you know, and I grew up in a very conservative environment where, we all tried to be tough and all this stuff. Even as a kid, I remember my best friends, you know, saying stuff to me like, man, if we could just combine our bodies and be halfway between your body and my body, we would have the best bodies and stuff like that, you know, like this idea. So like a lot of my friends felt too skinny, you know, they weren't buff enough or whatever. And so there was always these, like, men are very aware too, you know, and perhaps we're just not at a place where we feel like we know how to talk about it or able to talk about it or possibly see the relevance to our lives. Like maybe we need to have some sort of tremendous mental health crisis like I did to awaken to these challenges.
I believe that's true, yeah. That you just don't talk about stuff until you hit rock bottom.
Right. Yeah, so sexuality was a huge turning point for me with my my need to control my body. When I was very young, it was like food was something of a fix. It made me feel good. I liked it. And there was a forbidden aspect of it too eventually that also felt like I wanted it.
Did you have strict parents as well that said, no?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, okay. Or it was confusing to me because it's like sometimes we could and sometimes we couldn't. I couldn't really grasp why or how. Mm-hmm. I just, the rules about it were confusing to me.
Yeah. And I so related when you said to the other person on the podcast that you were always envious of what your friends could eat and that you basically hung out with people just waiting for some sort of snack to happen or them producing some. And then you mentioned Dunkaroos, and we don't get that in Europe. I was like, what are these? And I was fantasizing about them, like they must have been awesome. What were they? Because I was exactly the same. I was like, can I come to your place and then I'll be in the kitchen?
Yeah, exactly. So I had like my favorite sleepover spots, my favorite friends, and like, I don't want it to sound like it's all that was on my mind. I had great friends, and some of these guys I'm still friends with today. But like, as a child, that's what I remember about it. I remember, my buddy Kyle's mom having all this food stashed in the pantry, and just like And it wasn't just me. It was the other kids too. We would stock our pants with these snacks and go downstairs in the basement, and we would that's all we did was watch TV, play video games, and eat these snacks until we were practically sick, you know?
Yeah.
I can feel like that felt like an addiction to me at that time. Like, because when I grew up and got into alcohol and drugs, it felt very similar. The quality felt very similar to me. You know, it was almost like I was training myself, or perhaps that's just my disposition. I don't really know, you know, and I think it's probably a bit of both, just like most things.
Mm-hmm.
So sexuality was a big piece. And yeah, during puberty, those kinds of years. And I think I especially noticed that other boys felt much more like competition, you know,
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like a threat to a lot of them too. So like I remember I had this girlfriend that was very dear to me, and a lot of guys were interested in her, and she would get relentless comments. Why are you with it? The fat kid, all this kind of stuff. Even her mom made a comment about it. Similar thing, like, are you going to date the fat kid all through high school? Things like that.
For real?
And like I found out about that because her feelings were so hurt, and she told me, you know. So just stuff like that, and so it became just intolerable for me. And in fact, there was this one particular breaking point where I switched schools for high school, and we were having kind of an orientation retreat where we went away for the weekend to this campground, and one of the employees there worked at my past school, and I had heard that he was interested in my girlfriend at the time, and he had it out for me. He worked in the cafeteria, so every time we went in the cafeteria this weekend, you know, he would come up to me and say, and be very obnoxious. So he would say, "Chris, the food's almost ready. Please be patient. It's taking time, but it's gonna be there when you get in there." That kind of stuff.
What a dick.
And then I would sit down. He'd come over. "Have you had enough to eat? You know, we're running out, but I think we can make some more work for you." So he was doing this sort of manipulative, like, sarcastic thing. It was just killing me, especially because I was meeting new people and I was in a new school environment. And I remember going back to the cabin, and I cried myself to sleep, you know. 9th grade, I was probably 14. And something switched in me. Like, so I had for the past 5 or 8 years of my childhood, I had been being told to lose weight, to diet, to, you know, my family had gotten me personal trainers to help me exercise. I mean, the whole bit. And something switched in me, and I decided that I wanted those things for myself, and I wanted to lose weight, and that enough was enough. And a lot of it had to do too with wanting to be attractive. So basically, that's what happened. I started doing the Atkins diet, which I think my dad was kind of into at that time. So I don't remember if he's exactly the one that introduced me to it or what, but I started restricting carbs. I started doing all kinds of things. You know, it was Atkins, and then I went to a local nutritionist, and he had his own book that was just basically like the Atkins diet, but, you know, maybe a little closer to something like South Beach. People are familiar with that kind of thing. So anyways, but it was the same deal. The whole idea was just minimal carbohydrates. And I did this, and I also got introduced to ephedrine by a personal trainer. And so I started at about 14, 15 years old taking ephedrine and not having any carbohydrates.
Oh, God.
And it was really unfortunate because I don't know when you know, having a condition like bipolar disorder, which is chronic, it sort of like makes me wonder where along the line I might have been neurologically compromised, you know? And I think that having taken ephedrine and then ephedrine-like substances throughout my development.
Where did you get them from?
The trainer gave them to me.
Wow. I can't believe that, because they gave them to me as well, like appetite suppressants, which is basically was speed, and they took it from the market later on. And I was like, oh, this is the solution. And it never occurred to me that it was a problem, because it was my doctor that prescribed them to me. So, and even in your case, it was your personal trainer?
Right. And so we put some trust in these people. It's terrible. And I mean, I remember like yesterday, the first time I took it, and I ate a salad and I felt full.
Yeah, exactly. Me too.
And I went, and I just remember, I remember telling my buddy Taylor, still good friends with me today. I remember saying to him, man, I take this stuff that, that my trainer gave me, and I have a salad and I'm not even hungry. So anyway, so this problem continued to escalate. So that was sort of my gateway drug, right? So I did the ephedrine, then the ephedrine got removed, and by the time it got removed, I was hooked. Honestly, I was hooked the second I had that salad and wasn't hungry.
Yeah.
And so I took things like Xenadrin and Hydroxycut and similar products like that for, I would say I was on those for almost 10 years, from about 14 to about 22, 23. You're not supposed to sell those to minors. I would go into GNC and buy them as a 16-year-old, no problem. Terrible. So things like that. So I started doing the real diet restriction and diet pills, and then I started getting really into weightlifting, and I became just very. It just consumed me. It was what I thought mattered. And then what happened was I got to the weight that I thought I needed to be at. I got to the body fat percentage I thought I needed to have. I was attractive the way I wanted girls to find me, and I was still not okay. Mm-hmm. And that's really when things got messy for me, is because I had almost an existential crisis. Okay, I have this body I'm supposed to have. People my whole life have been telling me that I have such a great personality and I'm so fun and all this kind of stuff. And if I just had the body, I'd be almost perfect.
Yes, exactly. That's what they tell you.
And so then I'm like, well, why am I still not lovable? Why do I still feel this sort of hole in my soul?
Yes.
These are the things that didn't make sense to me. And I think it was really easy to unravel, especially in the face of believing I was in love with someone and not being able to get it. And that, for whatever reason, was an impetus for me to just crack. Like, okay, everything I thought I was supposed to be, I am, and I still don't have what I want. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Totally. But you were binging at the time, right? Because yes. I heard you describe or write about your pre-planned binges, because they tell us how to binge by telling us there are cheat meals, right?
I don't think I'm going to be blowing anybody's mind with this, but basically every diet I was ever on had a cheat component. It was a designated time to eat whatever you want or eat what's not on the menu, so to speak. And I was told from everyone with these carb restrictive deals that you could cheat once a week. And my nutritionist told me that if I could confine it to an hour, that would be best, because that would mitigate the insulin spike or something weird like that. I don't remember. I don't know the science, and I've heard that the science is bad anyways, but that's what they told me. And
so you had to eat really, really fast?
Yeah, exactly. So I sort of trained myself to binge, through these cheat things. And so that's what I would do. And I would what started as like a particular Sunday meal or something like that turned into like an entire day where I would have a cheat day. And then that coincided also with my binge drinking and drug use. And so sometimes I would just get really intoxicated, and I would and then I would also eat. So I was just like, I mean, you can imagine, I'm a teenager,
Yeah.
and I'm so hyper restrictive all throughout the week, working out, obsessive about eating every 3 hours, and all, just like a machine. And then Friday would come around, and I would go straight to the park after school, and I would get high. And then we would go to the liquor store with our fake IDs, and I would mix vodka and Diet Coke, because that's was the best carb drink I could have. At least that's what I thought. And then, and I would get drunk and high. And then by the end of the night, I would also binge on food, fast food or whatever. And then, I would be just in a total mess the weekend. And then Monday would roll around, and I almost looked forward to it. I almost looked forward to getting back into that sort of machine mode.
As if to punish yourself for, yeah. And then you cracked, and then that psychotic episode happened?
Yes. Yeah, so I had the psychotic episode, and then something that was very interesting about this is I gained a lot of weight, because not only was I severely depressed following the manic episode, which is normal, but I also had to take mood stabilizing medications, antipsychotic medications that cause weight gain. And I'll tell you, between having a public psychosis, not being able to go to the first semester of school, and then gaining about 40 pounds, I wanted to die.
You were terrified of the reaction of everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And once I heard that the medication caused weight gain, I stopped taking it. And then I went to school, and I was just a disaster. I felt like I didn't want to try to lose the weight. I think part of me at that time was to the point where I didn't have it in me. And that was the first time where I experienced trying to be restrictive and not being able to. So what it looked like is being incredibly restrictive until I basically couldn't take it any longer, and then binging, and then doing it again, and then binging, and then, just over and over and over again, to the point where I would wake up in the morning, and I would only have something like a protein shake. And then for lunch, have something very restrictive, maybe a salad or something. And then by the time dinner rolled around, I just would eat.
Understandably, yeah. So you felt like a failure on top of everything.
Exactly. And then on top, to have my addiction and my alcoholism was just so out of control. I started skipping class. I was anxiety riddled. I mean, I was terrified of everything and everyone and every person that I saw when I got back to school. I would try to figure out how much they knew about my condition and what they were thinking about me, and it just felt like everyone knew my deepest, darkest pain, and I was just learning it myself, and it was an incredibly vulnerable time.
Did you get bullied for what happened to you?
I really didn't, and in fact, people were incredibly supportive. I mean, I had friends, go out of their way to make sure that I was being included, and as my support system, I think probably saved my life, because if I would have been shunned by my friends, I don't know what would happen.
Yeah.
I was already so miserable, and to have them continue to want to be a part of my life, I think was possibly the saving grace.
And what made you stop drinking? Was it your friends that told you that you might have to go to rehab, or?
So it was sort of the friendships was difficult because we were all in college, and there's a huge drinking scene, and everyone's coming home from school and getting high. At least it seemed that way to me. Mm-hmm. And but what started happening is my friends got more and more uncomfortable going out with me and stuff because I would be so belligerent and out of control. And then really what happened was I couldn't stay in school. I started having to drop classes or various things like that. And also I think I wanted something better for myself than I had, and I just didn't know how to get it. And so, but I was aware that this isn't how I wanted to live my life. I mean, I started taking Antabuse, which is a drug that basically makes you extremely sick if it mixes with alcohol. So I took that, and that was sort of a short-term solution to stop drinking. But then I eventually stopped taking it and drank again. I was arrested. I mean, there was all kinds of things that happened during that time that just pushed me further and further to a bottom. And then I had another hospitalization. I had another psychotic episode when I basically joined. I practically joined a yoga cult and got really into all this spiritual stuff, but without knowing much about it. So I didn't really understand what the risk was for me with bipolar disorder and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I thought I was enlightened. I mean, the whole bit. And I had to go to the hospital. That was devastating too. And eventually I just couldn't do it anymore. I went broke. I spent all my money on cocaine, and I dropped all my classes because I was too anxious to go sit in a group of people sober. And that was when I went home and I basically begged my parents to send me to rehab and to forgive me, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was back in 2007, and I've been sober and clean ever since. And, you know, part of why I got into life coaching is because of the lessons I learned. Once I took away the drugs and the alcohol, that's when the healing could start. And, you know, I had thought for so many years that if I just didn't use, that life would be okay.
Yeah.
I realized
exactly.
I was using to try to fix what felt so broken in me.
Yeah, you didn't have the coping mechanism anymore, and then the troubles started coming up and needed to be resolved, I would assume.
Exactly. And so anyone with any sort of recovery understands this, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, you know, those the more we sort of change our behaviors towards the healthier expression, I guess, the more we can feel the uncomfortable feelings that were sort of propelling us to have these destructive behaviors in the first place. And that's what it was like for me. And so once I got sober, as could be predicted, my disordered eating got much worse because I didn't understand the connection yet. And so then eventually I really had to confront that as well.
How did you do that?
I was so I went to treatment, and I had this really wonderful experience in the wilderness therapy, and that was for like 45 days. And then I went to a sort of therapeutic halfway house, and it was actually in Boulder, Colorado. Is a place called Aim House, and it's nationally known. People from all over the country go, and sometimes international. And I was presented with the opportunity to live there for 6 months, and then I would have to do either part-time work or school, and it kind of would set me up to transition out of sort of the treatment setting. So that's what I did. And what happened was when I got there, I was so neurotic about food. I mean, I was like, I wanted to go back to what I had known, which was Atkins low carb restriction. And they were serving normal food, you know, sandwiches and, you know, grains and things like that.
Heaven forbid.
Right, heaven forbid. And I felt like I wasn't being supported in my health. This is how I thought about it. And so I put up a huge stink at the place, and to the point where they were concerned, and it got their attention. And so I would do that, but then I would go, like, you know, so I'd have class or something, and then I would come back with a pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream and go sit in front of the TV and eat it. And so there's real inconsistencies, and so they noticed. And I had a therapist. My therapist there recommended the eating disorder specialist, which actually mostly worked with the Women's House. And she came over, and she talked to me. And she said she could arrange working with me and all this stuff. And I tell you what, like, it was almost a spiritual experience meeting with her just one time, because she asked me questions, and I had been in therapy for years. I had had a psychologist for bipolar disorder and addiction and all this, but disordered eating was not really on the radar. I don't know how. I guess it just wasn't maybe it didn't feel like as big of a risk factor. I don't know. But basically, she asked me questions about my family of origin, my relationship with food growing up, how many diets I'd been on, how many pills, types of supplements I'd taken, how long I had done that, and I felt so raw in front of her that I didn't even feel like I could touch it. It was so painful when she started asking. All she did was ask me questions. And it was so painful. And I told her, I'm not ready to do this. I'm trying to be sober. I'm trying to figure out if I'm bipolar, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's too much.
And I said, this is too much. And she said, well, just contact me if you ever do, and be honest with yourself, basically. And that planted a seed that would eventually grow into my recovery that I have today. It's like, I feel, and I truly do believe this, I feel like you cannot unlearn the truth. And there's something in us that knows the truth. And recovery is kind of like that. I mean, some of us realize we're sick years before we actually get help. Years. Mm-hmm. And I think it's that piece where it's like, once we know the truth, it's just getting ourselves ready to accept it and do something about it,
Yeah, or feel worthy of help even.
Sure.
So how did you it's probably not easy to get rid of disordered eating and developing a healthy body image for a man either. So did you call her again at a later stage?
Yeah, so what happened was I became sort of interested in my own way with food and body issues. And I kind of tried to manage on my own. I sort of added it to the list of things I was working with in the 12-step program. And I did okay. I'm going to say okay because I still was in it, but I wasn't in it so deep that it was like causing me constant pain.
You stopped dieting basically, or?
I sort of like eased up a little bit, I should say. It wasn't so intense. But then what I noticed was when I would date someone, these issues would flare up.
Yeah, of course.
And that I just couldn't figure out what was going on with that. Why when I invited someone into my life, I would feel so much more sick, all this kind of stuff. And so I met who is my wife today. And I met her when I was about 3 or 4 years sober. Mm-hmm. And what happened was I was so in love with her, and I was in so much pain with this feeling like I couldn't gain weight, or she wouldn't love my body, mm-hmm. and all this kind of stuff that and I was open with her about it, and I talked to her about it, and I ended up calling that therapist from 3 years before.
Wow.
And I started working with her.
She made you, or she helped you stop dieting.
Yeah, so she at least challenged me, and it was so hard. I mean, when you grow up doing this stuff, it's like, it feels like, well, you're asking me to do what?
I know.
And so she introduced me to intuitive eating, and it was just unbelievable how difficult it was for me to grasp, mm-hmm. I mean, I just did not get it. I really did not get it. And it was to the point where I would have these therapy sessions with her, and we'd be talking about all this stuff, and things that I tried not to think about. So like I had when I was 17, I had liposuction. 17 mm-hmm. years old. I thought that I needed it. And when I look back, I have a picture from like a month before I decided to do that. And it's probably the best shape I'd been in, you know, objective shape, you know, that I'd been in my entire life.
Yeah, and you still didn't like yourself.
Still needed it. I still needed it, yeah. And then not only that, but when I did it, I felt like it didn't work. Felt like it made my body worse. I mean, I was just nuts about it. And so I had to confront things like that, you know. I had to talk about my family and my parents, and you know, my dad he's an oculoplastic surgeon, and he does cosmetic. He doesn't do just cosmetic, but he has a cosmetic side to his practice where people go in to get a facelift or whatever.
So it's all very appearance.
So stuff was intertwined for me, and I never could make the connection. And I had to unpack that. Well, anyway, so I would have these therapy sessions with her, and we would talk about intuitive eating and like I'm going to listen to my body, blah, blah. And I would pull out of her parking lot, and there was a Wendy's before I got to the exit, and I would go through the Wendy's telling myself I need a cheeseburger with a large fry. That's what intuitively I need right now.
And maybe it was because you restricted for so long. Yeah,
exactly. Maybe it was, but I was just, I really was not quite sure how to do this. It was very foreign to me. And so it just took years, you know. And what I tell people too is, especially people I work with eating issues, it's like I don't have a hard date where I can say I'm recovered. I just don't. It's not like with drinking or with drugs where the last time I used was in July 2007. It's not like that, because to me, it's a path that just goes on and on and on. And it's like, how gentle can I be? How forgiving can I be? How open can I be to my experience? And how much can I honor myself?
Wow.
That's an ongoing process. It's always going to be there. And so, has it been a long time since I binged and cried? Yes. Yes, it's been a very long time, you know. But today I don't, you know, in the process of being bombarded with the media and images and things, you know, I go see a movie and it's like, you know, I love these superhero movies. I grew up playing with like X-Men action figures and all this stuff. And these guys were always shredded,
ripped,
you know, huge muscles. And even last night I was watching this boxing movie called Southpaw with Jake Gyllenhaal, and he's ripped. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, and my mind's going like,
should I look like this?
Incredible to look like that, you know? Yeah. And I have to, and it's just, oh, but wait a minute, that's not what makes a person valuable.
Yeah.
You know?
Even after all this work, it goes to show how hard it is in our society to accept a body that is just a body, a normal body.
Right. So this stuff, this is ongoing, you know, but to me, it's very similar to like my meditation practice. So I believe in the power of meditation. I'm very into that. And I think one day I'll try to step into more of how I think that helps. But something that I've noticed, and I do this for so many different reasons, but I notice that the thinking doesn't really stop. It's more my attachment to it, you know? And what has grown over time in my meditation practice is my ability to just be okay with what I'm thinking and to not have it be a point of pleasure or pain or attachment or aversion. And to me, that's what some of these like eating and body thoughts are like. It's not all the way gone. It's just not as loud and obnoxious, you know? It's more just something that happens and I don't have to act on it, you know?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to work on right now. Because usually when we start coming from a restrictive past, I would assume you had to come to terms with a different body, and that's never easy. I mean, for us, it means like accepting that we might look different than we wanted to.
Right. That's difficult, you know. I mean, even like I'll tell you I'm gonna tell you this is just so honest and personal, but I'm gonna go for it. So recently I had a wedding and I got this picture back, and I wanted to make it my profile picture, right? So my profile picture on Facebook right now is I'm in a tuxedo with my wife. We're at one of my best friend's weddings. Mm-hmm. And in the photo, okay, I noticed I have a double chin, right?
Oh, and do you hate it then?
And there's a part of me before I posted it that went, wait a minute, there's a double chin in this photo. Mm. And you know what I did? I said, you know what, that's silly, and I posted it.
Yay for you, man.
And that's just that's what recovery looks like to me today. Exactly. It looks like just confronting it and saying, you know what, that's bullshit. Who cares?
Yeah, loving acceptance. Like, yeah, that's me, and I'm a wonderful person.
Exactly. Yeah. And for me, I've had to do a lot of soul searching about what is the point of having a human body? Why do I have a human body? And to me, my body is how I interact with the environment. It's how I interact with others. It's what keeps me kicking, keeps me alive.
It carries your incredible laughter.
Right?
It does. I love that. Yeah.
So if we can appreciate the beautiful opportunity that our body affords us, you know, then to travel this human experience, that to me, that's the core of eating and body recovery for me, is an appreciation for this precious human life that I have. And when I think about it that way, it does not matter at all if I have a six-pack or not, you know, or something like that. It doesn't matter, you know?
It really doesn't at all.
And so that's what I come back to. And that can be difficult. You know, for instance, I'm married, and like there's something about having partnership, a secure partnership, that maybe makes that a little easier to relax into, you know?
Yeah, I would say.
And I do honor that for people. I think a lot of neurosis around body obsession has to do with finding love. Mm-hmm. And getting the love we deserve, you know. You know, I'm really blessed to have a wife that is okay with every part of me. And I know that's something that people long for. And I do think that it starts from a place of knowing what we're worth, you know. I do feel like when I met my wife, it's not like I was perfect or something, but I was very solid in my worth, you know, that I was like allowed to be here and that I wasn't any better than or worse than anyone else.
Yeah. So that you could allow yourself to be loved.
Yeah. Be willing to work towards that love, you know? Mm-hmm. I think that's really like something, you know. Do you get The Bachelor in Sweden? Do you watch The Bachelor?
I live in Switzerland.
Switzerland, I'm sorry, Switzerland.
Yeah, but we still, I don't have a TV, but when I was working in the media, I was aware that this was also running, yeah.
So there's things like that where it's like, I just wonder about the cultural consciousness of, I like to follow sort of like the pop stuff just to see like, well, this is how people think now.
Yeah, but it's degenerating.
It is, yeah. You have to be careful.
Down, yeah.
Yeah.
It's really important to expose ourselves to good energies and to grounding stuff and to body positive attitudes and loving attitudes. I think that has helped me tremendously.
Exactly. And I do think that we're created, like the opportunity to create change in just how we live our lives and choose what we're exposed to is a really beautiful sort of offering to the world as well. You know, the more we can relax into our recovery that has far-reaching implications for society and for the world.
Yeah. Even what you do now has a ripple effect, because first of all, you make sense of your whole turbulent past. And second of all, you're a man who talks about this, who talks about vulnerability and sensitivity. And you are sharing that and your empathy and your work as a life coach.
Yes. I mean, I hope so. I think I have a buddy that calls it enlightened self-interest, So like, I don't want anyone to ever get confused and think that I'm some sort of, purely altruistic being. I benefit a great deal from helping people. And there's some part of me in that. I can recognize that in every client relationship, there's sort of like the part of me that wishes I had someone earlier, stronger, wiser, something to that effect,
Yes, and we're always teachers and students at the same time.
Exactly. You opened up talking about, just identifying as sensitive. And I think I really appreciate that, because it's easy for me to get lost in sort of diagnostic labels and whatnot. Mm. And I think at the core, I'm just a sensitive person. I'm sensitive.
That's what I see. Yeah.
Yeah. And to be able to see that as strength is something that took a really long time. And
it's incredible strength.
Yeah. And I think especially for men out there, I think I see some of these young guys, adolescents and, young adults that places where I used to be. I see when there's all the flare up anger, nonsense and whatnot, all I see is pain. I don't see that as some sort of posturing or something,
It is pain.
And gosh, we are sensitive a lot these days. That's for sure. And I think we're going to be more and more sensitive because we're just exposed to so much more now,
Mm-hmm. What would be your suggestion for young men or grown men to deal with their sensitivity instead of just drowning it out or acting out by being angry?
Well, I think the most important thing is honesty. I really do. I start with honesty every time. And the reason is we know. I mean, as men and boys, we know we're hurting. It's being honest enough to say it and honest enough to look at it, And I think that's really the starting point. And I also think reframing sensitivity and courage, It takes tremendous, tremendous courage to be in recovery, to be in true recovery. It takes tremendous courage to be in love.
Oh, yeah, true.
And that's what we're all doing anyways. We're all in love. We're all looking for love. We're all asking for love. Love is driving every single thing we do, whether it's in presence or absence. Mm-hmm. It's what's keeping the whole thing going. And I think that's a scary proposition for a young man that's busy building a barrier. Maybe a muscular armor.
Yeah, exactly. They armor up.
That's frightening to really face how much we love and how much we're longing for love. That's probably the most vulnerable place, but it's also the most true place. And that's true strength, And I can only tell a young man that because I've been there. Mm-hmm. And the times where I was trying to be tough and learning to fight and bodybuilding and, posturing and consuming sex and trying not to feel. I mean, those are times where I was the weakest. I have no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm. That makes you so precious for men, especially. You're someone they can relate to and open up to. I think you're a real role model with what you do. I don't know if you feel lonely sometimes because you're surrounded, I would guess, by not as many men that are as open as you.
Yes, I know, but I think that's my form of leadership, That's how I can be a leader, is continue to step out and lead with the heart. There's a Mother Teresa quote where she said something to the effect of how she doesn't care to be anti-war but pro-peace, something like that.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. I feel like that's an important place just for me. I actually feel incredibly sick when I start being anti-anything. I really do. I would much rather bring into the world a pro-positive approach to happiness and well-being and love, you know?
Beautiful. That's exceptional for a guy.
I actually have found, and I think this is worth noting because I haven't been able to speak about it, is women have been very drawn to working with me. And something that I think is a gift I can even give women is that men feel these things too.
Yeah.
There's maybe some mystique about it because there's such a cultural oppression for men as far as their ability to feel, our ability to feel. Even like in my work with women, there will be comments like, you know, something to the effect of trying to do sex like a man or trying to do feelings like a man or something like that. And I have to say, well, hold on now, because what you're describing, that man's going through pain, just like perhaps a woman would be going through pain. It's just more of an unconscious process, you know? And that's important. That's important for all of us to be able to connect on. So I don't feel necessarily lonely as a man in this work. I feel like, how lucky am I to have so many women leading the way, you know, and to be able to learn from that perspective, you know.
It's incredible. So I think we're running out of time, sadly. I mean, we could talk all night, but so I want you to leave your contact details with everyone so that if people want to work with you, I mean, maybe you have a special sort of clientele that you like to approach, but if people are interested in working with you, where can they find you?
Sure. So I really work with anyone in recovery. And I really mean that from, you know, mood, behavioral, or addiction issues. It doesn't much matter to me because I take a total wellness approach. So I look at, you know, mental, emotional, physical, social, and spiritual areas of people's lives. And we work on what is needed for them. It's a custom deal. And really everything that people would need, they can find on colecoaching.com. My name is Chris Cole, so C-O-L-E. It's my last name, colecoaching.com. And, you know, everything can be found there. And I have a link to my book as well, The Body of Chris, a memoir of obsession, addiction, and madness, where I basically recount my experience with mental health issues, recovery, and even spiritual awakening. So people can check that out on Amazon as well.
It's an incredible book. I loved reading it. It's like flying through a book. I would recommend it to everyone. And my last question to you, as is for everyone, what would you like to be remembered for?
Oh my gosh. So I think I would like to be remembered for fearless love.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's say amen to that.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, brother, for opening up. I really loved this conversation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
This was today's dose of badassery from Life Unrestricted. Find the show notes with links to everything we mentioned in this episode over at lifeunrestricted.org. And if this show is making you feel good, awesome. Make sure to subscribe and please let others feel good too. By leaving a 5-star review on iTunes, you'll help make this show more visible and therefore more accessible for others. You're the best. Thanks.